Hi, welcome to another installment of the Tibbens Education Services and Tutoring Writing SOL videos. Today, we're going to look at the process that you should use when you're writing the short paper or essay portion of the writing SOL. Now, if you're going to public high school in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you're going to be taking a two-day writing test, a two-part test in March. It's going to assess all of the writing skills that you've been working on. Okay, so there's a multiple choice test on one day, and then there's an essay. We have other videos that are going to take care of the multiple choice portion. I also have some videos where I break down all the prompts, explain what they mean and how to respond to them. Punctuation videos, kind of got everything you need here. But today, this video, we're going to focus specifically on the processes you should use for your essay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at what that process looks like. Okay, so we're going to take a look right here and share this screen. And here we go. Okay, now, as we begin, okay, again, I'm Ryan Tibbens, and you can track down more information about Tibbens Education Services and Tutoring, services we provide, also general information about college admissions, standardized testing, improving your writing, and, articles of interest through our Facebook page, facebook.com/TibbensEST, and on Twitter @TibbensEST. You can also email me directly at mrtibbens@yahoo.com. Now, for today's video on the essay writing process, what do we need to do? Okay, what are we really talking about here? Well, first, we've got to talk about how to break down the prompt. If we don't know what they're asking us, we don't know what to write, okay? So one of the most important things that we need to work on is to make sure we understand exactly what the prompts mean. How do we break them down? How do we make sure we understand the topic we're supposed to address? If you write an off-topic essay, it doesn't matter how good the writing is. If your essay is off-topic, you're going to fail the test, okay? Then we're going to talk about T-charts and some simple ways to break down your answer options to make sure you're taking a strong position. We're going to talk about how to write a good thesis and why you should always write your thesis first, a basic outline, and then you're going to write your essay. Okay. And so this is, really what we're going to walk through today. This is also the actual process for the test. You break down the prompt, you plot out your answer options, you write a rough draft of your thesis, you make a quick outline, identify useful evidence, you type your essay, and then you proofread. Well, along the way, I'm going to show you some samples and some things like that that will hopefully be of help to you as you work through this process. So whether you're watching this video on your own, you found us on YouTube, or share it on social media, or maybe your teacher's having you watch this, I'm going to try to keep it quick. Can't promise. I'm going to make sure you know everything you need to know about how to address and tackle the short paper version or portion of the test with a high degree of confidence and skill. So number one, first thing you do, you sit down on test day, they go through all the directions, the proctor reads you the prompt, or sorry, the directions. They set you up with your prompt. They say, okay, you may begin, you click, boom, there's your prompt on the screen. Now, if you don't understand what the prompt means, pardon my language, you are screwed, okay? Because you can't ask anyone for help. Once you're into the live testing situation, there's really nothing else you can do except read it and start writing. You can raise your hand and ask the proctor if they will read it to you, but they can't tell you what it means. They can't define words or anything like that. So we really want to make sure that we understand what the prompts mean ahead of time and that we've practiced on at least a few of them, hopefully a lot of them. And then we want to understand, really, what do I do when I'm working on my own? Again, there is another video available on this YouTube channel where you can look through all of the SOL prompts available. So if you're doing the EOC, the end of course or 11th grade writing SOL, I have another video that addresses every single possible prompt. I read it to you out loud. I tell you the part you have to focus on. I give you some ideas about how to answer it. It's not the most thrilling content in the world, but if you are shooting for a passing score or maybe a really high score on it, strongly recommend that you get familiar with these prompts ahead of time. Now, when I say break down the prompt, this is the first thing that you're going to do, right? When the test begins, prompt pops up on the screen. So what do? Read it carefully. Read it twice. Okay. Then I recommend that you sort of figure out what's the essential information? What's the prompt? What's the background, et cetera. Write it down in your scratch paper. Okay. Your testing proctor should have given you a blank sheet of paper and a number 2 pencil. Write it on the paper. This prevents you from having to flip back and forth on the screen, pulling the prompt back up, or using the notepad tool. By the way, the notepad tool is awful. Don't even use it. Do all your planning, all that extra stuff, do it on paper. It takes a little extra time. Well, sometimes it'll save you time, but I promise you're going to stay focused and you have a better understanding of the topic you're working with. Okay. So copy that thing on scratch paper and then let's break it down. Okay. So I have 2 sample prompts here. These are both real SOL questions, by the way, and I'll show you how to distinguish between introductory information, the actual prompt to respond to, and then the sort of vague reminders they give you about what should be in a good essay. So your first prompt is, many students become involved in extracurricular activities to enrich their educational experiences, and some even become involved in so many activities that they have little time to study or complete homework assignments. That's all introductory information. None of that is required. Okay, that's stuff they give you to help you understand what it is we're talking about. You can use some of those ideas to help you in an introductory paragraph. Do not quote it, but you can use the concepts, put them in your own words, and that's sort of fair game for use as introductory material. But notice that's not the question that you're actually responding to. The question comes either in the middle or in the second half of each one of these. So the actual prompt, continues, and here's the question. Should schools control student involvement in extracurricular activities, or should the decision regarding extracurricular involvement be left to students and their families? That's it. They give you two options. Students and families control it, or the school decides. Okay, those are your only options. For those of you who maybe have taken, an AP Lang class, or your teachers have taught you with a little more nuance, which is a really good thing. You might say, well, a little both. Maybe the parents should make the choice, but the school should offer some guidance. So your real answer might be a little bit of a blend. Don't do that on this test, because we're now into the reminder section of this prompt. The last two sentences remind you of what you need to do to score well. Take a position on this issue. Pick a side. In real life and for other essay assignments, it might be a very good answer to give a qualifying thesis, say a little this, a little that, but you don't want to do that here. Okay, they tell you take a position. So you either want students and families to choose, or you want the school to control it, and you're going to pick one or the other. Then support your response with reasons, topics for your body paragraphs, excuse me, topics for your body paragraphs, and then specific examples. Okay, so examples. That means I have to have evidence, concrete evidence, not if a person did a thing. You're not going to, at any point in this essay, you don't want to get stuck saying, if a student had to choose, then that student might. That's a hypothetical situation, which is fine for general logic. It doesn't count as concrete evidence for this essay, and you're not going to score as well on the rubric unless you actually give an example. So instead of saying if a student, say when my friend Billy, and then pretend that your friend Billy, you may not even have a friend named Billy, whatever. Pretend that that's the situation. That's the example you're going to use. Make it concrete. Think about your own experiences, friends and family. Think about current events. Think about history. Think about television shows, movies, music, art. But it has to be specific. We need to be able to name the person, or name the artwork, or name the historical event when we're thinking about our evidence. I say this all now. I'll repeat this later in the presentation. I say this now because sometimes once you copy this down and you focus in on the prompt, we forget about the other things that we need to do. Okay. And so part of this process is going to be to make sure we remember all the components of a good essay and include them. So the first thing I do is I read it. I go, okay, so what does that mean? Maybe I read it again. Then here's the pain. And some of you aren't going to do this, but I warned you, you want to write this down on your paper. I know it's a longer prompt, write the whole thing down word for word on your scratch paper. That way you've written it, which helps your sort of ingrains it in your memory a little bit. You remember what the topic is better. You also can look down and you can manipulate it more easily. You can underline, you can circle keywords. If you want to say, okay, maybe I'm going to slightly rephrase this prompt so that it's something a little more direct. Should schools control involvement, or should students and families? That's the question. So I might even put that in my own words. I just have to be 100% sure that I have rephrased it or paraphrased it with the correct and true meaning. Okay. So that's it. I recognize I have introductory information to set me up with a general idea, a little bit of background knowledge or context, the actual question or prompt, and then the reminders. Let's look at the other one here. The great artist Michelangelo once said, the greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. Do you agree or disagree with Michelangelo's statement? Take a position on this issue, support your response with reasons and specific examples. Notice how almost all the prompts end with those exact same two sentences. A couple of them have a very slight, they slightly modify the wording, but they mean the same thing. You have to pick a side. You have to have clear reasons, notice it's plural, more than one body paragraph. And you have to have examples, concrete evidence that goes into each one of those. Okay. So in this one, you have the introductory information, which is the quote from Michelangelo. The greater danger for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. He's saying that the real problem is not that we have a high goal and we don't achieve it. He says most of us, if we're going to have a problem with goal setting and what we achieve in our lives, it's going to be that we set a goal that's too easily achieved and then we achieve it. We go, look at the great stuff I did, not realizing you could have done more. So he's suggesting you should set lofty goals, even if they seem unachievable, because ultimately you will sort of make it further in life and get more done through striving for those lofty and maybe unachievable goals. Now, you can answer it either way. Clearly, you hear me sort of leaning in the direction of, oh, well, it sounds like a lofty goal is a good thing. But you might think in your own experience to say, when I set a high goal and I don't achieve it, my parents come down hard on me because they think I failed. I feel bad about myself because I didn't achieve the goal. I'm discouraged, so I quit trying. These are all reasons that you might want to set more sort of attainable goals. That's reasonable. What we need to do is make sure we understand the question. So for the quote questions, and I say quote questions, watch the other video where I break down the prompts. In my opinion, the better topics, the better prompts are the ones that include a quote from a famous person, a great thinker, something like that, because they really free you up to interact with sort of cooler ideas. You can write a more complex and more interesting, more persuasive essay. The problem is if you don't understand the quote, you don't know what to do. And some of the quotes can be a little bit tricky. So I strongly recommend you watch the other video for that reason. But in this question, they give you the quote and then it's, do you agree or disagree with Michelangelo's statement? Okay, so and when we're writing our thesis, you don't want to say I. No, I think, I feel, I believe, or in my opinion. Just cut those out of your writing entirely when you are writing these essays. You need to respond in third person, keep it focused, keep it arguable. If I say, in my opinion, Michelangelo is correct, well, that's fine, but that's a fact. That is your opinion. You need to state a claim, state a thesis that is arguable. Someone needs to hear it and say, well, that's not true. But if I say my opinion is he's correct, they can say he's not correct, but they can't tell me that my opinion is not my opinion. So get that language out of there. You say, okay, Michelangelo's statement about goals is correct because or is incorrect because. Michelangelo is correct that lofty goals help us achieve greatness because. Or Michelangelo is incorrect and we should or people should set achievable goals because, and then you list out your reasons. The most important thing here is that we understand what the prompt means. And again, there's another video that goes through every single one of these and breaks them down and explains them to you. But you got to make sure you know what it means and you have to underline. You got to mark what the actual question is. All right, so now let's move on. So let's say, okay, now I understand what the topic is. I know what I'm supposed to write about. And maybe my first reaction is I agree with Michelangelo. That doesn't mean that's the essay I should write. So before you move into actually writing or drafting a thesis or making an outline, I strongly recommend you take an extra 2, 3, 4 minutes. This isn't a crazy amount of time. And make a little T-chart, very, very simple graphic organizer to help you recognize not what you actually believe, but help you to recognize what essay you can write better. Remember that the people who are going to grade your SOL essays, that you might spend 40 minutes, an hour and 40 minutes. You might spend 3 hours writing this essay. The person who reads it and scores it is probably going to take about 2 minutes. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you really believe. They don't know anything about you. And, no offense, they don't care. So if you really believe one answer, but you realize, but I can actually argue better for the thing I don't believe, pick the answer you can argue for better. That's the whole point. It's a writing test. They would say, have you mastered persuasive writing and grammar and, the sort of the mechanics of writing well enough to earn a diploma in the Commonwealth of Virginia? So don't make it harder than it's got to be. What's the easy answer? Well, the best way to figure out what the easier position is to do a little T-chart. So I figure out what are the two sides. So for this one, let's go ahead and look at the extracurricular activities prompt. I think that one for most people is easier to think about. And so we'll stick there since we're just trying to learn the process right now. So I say, okay, well, schools could control it or schools should not, or parents and students, should. I create a T-chart. I just draw a line down the middle of my scratch paper or, down a section of it, bar it off at the top, and then I put my two answer options. Now underneath, what I'm going to do now is I am going to list all of the possible answer options. Okay, or sorry, all of the possible evidence that I can use. What that means is I'm going to say, what are any possible topics, ideas, reasons, examples that might be helpful to prove that answer and then to prove this answer. Okay, list them all. There is no such thing as a bad idea in this stage unless it's off topic. Don't write down things that are off topic that wouldn't relate to extracurriculars or student and parent choice or things like that. But list everything else you can think of and put it on the side that it would better support. Then you look and say, okay, well, which side has better stuff, not more stuff. Sometimes one side will have 10 things on it, the other one only has 3 or 4, but they're really good 3 or 4. So you look and say, okay, so what's the quality? What's the more persuasive side here? It may or may not be what I really believe. It's just this, I'm setting myself up to write an easier and hopefully better paper. And I say, okay, well, I think that in this case, schools should not control extracurricular activities. That should be parents or students. I like the reasons that I have over there better. I then read through them and I want to narrow it down. Now, generally speaking, you want to write sort of the standard 5-paragraph essay for your writing SOL. You don't have to. I've seen samples, at conferences where people from the state level, from the Department of Education presented. And at one point, the woman presenting showed an essay. It was essentially one long paragraph. And it wasn't like a run-on. It was just one good paragraph. It was remarkable and it earned a passing score. I don't think half the teachers in the room could have written that paragraph, though. I don't think that you, as a student, should set yourself up to write a 1-paragraph or even 2-paragraph response. I will tell you that to be comfortable and confident with the answer, I always tell my students you need to write at least 4 paragraphs and a maximum of 6. And I say maximum of 6 just because there is a length limit. And so as you're typing in the TestNav program, you will see, I think it's a word count, or they changed it a couple of years ago. I think maybe it's a character count now. It used to be a progress bar. Before that, it was a handwritten test and you had a limited number of pages. Whatever limitation there is, you cannot ramble on at great length, which is why we need to have a good answer chosen. We need to have good reasons and we need to have a plan in place. Okay. We can't just ramble our way through it. So I recommend that you plan for 4 or 5 paragraphs: introduction, body paragraphs. So there's 2, and then a conclusion, or intro, 3 body paragraphs and a brief conclusion. That's the simple way to do this. You've been working on that style of essay since probably 5th grade, 6th grade. Do what you know. Now, if you're a great writer and I can do this another way, I can have an arguable thesis, I can have topics, I can have evidence, I can work in a counter argument, my grammar's good. Do what you want. But if you want to keep this simple and earn a high score, write a strong 4 or 5-paragraph essay. Okay. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing that now is you have to decide how many reasons or topics you're going to choose here before we go into writing the thesis. So in this case, I like some of the stuff on the, say on the school should control side. I just don't think I can elaborate enough on them. My heart really isn't in it. So I'm going back to school should not control it. I look at my options. Students know their own interests. It's true. Okay. I crossed that one off my list. Well, I'll tell you one in a minute. Freedom to choose. Freedom is good. We should give people choices when we can. I think that's great. Learn personal responsibility. That's a good idea. Play to our own strengths. Yeah, you know what you're good at and what you want to do more than the school does. That makes sense. Academics aren't for everyone. So, maybe there's other stuff that I want to focus on. I'm more into athletics or music or art. Cool. Extracurricular scholarships. I might earn a scholarship by working hard on the thing I care most about or I love most. Maybe I'm applying to a college that specializes in this activity. And then education via activities. We learn through the things that we do. If you're involved in an extracurricular, band, drama, art, sports, most students would agree that they learn probably as much, at least personal sort of use kind of stuff, personal development. They learn as much through their extracurriculars as they do in the classroom. Do we really want the school to be choosing your class options and choosing those extracurriculars? So then I say, okay, well, what can I do the most with? I like to learn personal responsibility. I have to choose. And if I overburden myself, that's a lesson I need to learn, that I took on too much and I made the wrong choices, and I can learn and adapt. So I like that one. I'm going to keep it. Then education via activities. So the first is learning personal responsibility. I then see an easy transition into them learning about teamwork and leadership and, regulating our emotions, managing our time, things like that. So I see that as being a good transition. So I can go from personal responsibility to the other personal growth that occurs. And then I can point out that maybe I could earn scholarships by, working hard on the thing I love. Now, the reason I crossed out students know their own interests, well, I can use that idea when I talk about personal responsibility. It's my responsibility to choose things I like. If I choose an activity and I don't like it and I suffer for a season to get through it, that's on me. I don't get to blame the school. I'd say, look, I did that, right? So interest can be part of the personal responsibility. Interest can also be part of my extracurricular scholarships. If I love band and I'm going to work hard at it, maybe I can get a scholarship out of it. Well, that, if I don't love band, I'm just kind of doing it because of whatever, I'm probably not getting the scholarship because I didn't put in that extra work and that effort. So I'm not going to make interest its own paragraph. I'm going to use that idea in some other ones. Freedom to choose is cool, But again, I think that it's a little bit broad, and I can use the idea of freedom to choose with the personal responsibility. When I have the freedom to choose, I then also have to deal with the consequences of my choices. So I don't want to make that its own paragraph because it seems a little broad, it seems a little vague, but it also seems like an idea I can use maybe inside of the personal responsibility paragraph. Playing to our own strengths is going to be very similar to the student interest. And academics aren't for everyone, just feels kind of weak. We don't maybe all love the same classes in school, but we all should probably be learning at least some of this content. So I don't think I can write that paragraph well, or even if I can, I don't think it's going to convince my audience. Remember, your audience is very likely an English teacher. A lot of times the people reading these are retired English teachers or they're college students. They have all kinds of people who do the assessment, but consider that you have academic types who are reading them. I'm probably not going to write a paragraph about how I hate my academic classes and I should focus on other things, just because it's not going to interest my audience, right? So now I have my topics picked and I have them in order. I think that I can make good transitions from 1 to 2 to 3. So I labeled them all out. The next step is I write a rough draft of my thesis. On my scratch paper, handwrite it. What is your thesis going to be? Okay, there are 2 basic ways to write a thesis sentence: a closed thesis, which most of you have been learning through most of your public education, and then you have an open thesis, which some of you maybe have learned, particularly probably in the last year, 10th grade, 11th grade. Probably did this more if you've been in an AP or IB class. For the SOL, I kind of recommend that you stick with the closed thesis. Just it's simple, it keeps it organized. It's kind of what the readers are expecting to see. There's nothing wrong with an open thesis, but it's up to you. I don't see the real benefit to it. So anyway, the primary difference is in a closed thesis, which is what most of you are used to. You make your claim. That's the first part. You give your answer. Blank is blank. And then you list out your reasons. So parents and students should choose extracurriculars because, and then I list out those reasons. Okay. Or I can write the open thesis and say, for a wide variety of reasons, parents and students should choose their extracurriculars. Done. They're both arguable. It's a defensible claim. They respond to the prompt directly, and they give a purpose to my essay. I must have a thesis. If you write an essay that does not have a clear, direct thesis sentence, you will not pass this essay. And as a result, you will not pass this test. This is the single most important sentence you are going to write in the essay. And by the way, just in any essay you write, academic essay, your thesis is always the most important sentence. We usually say to situate it at or near the end of your introductory paragraph. Think of it this way. All I'm doing for the whole thing, I might write 5 paragraphs. All I'm really trying to do is get the reader to agree with, or at least strongly consider, the idea that I've put in my thesis. Everything I write before the thesis is introductory and context information to help people understand what my thesis means and why I'm telling it to them. Everything I write after the thesis is to get people to agree with it. If you say anything in your introduction that doesn't help someone to better understand the concept, like your topic, doesn't help them to understand what the thesis is going to mean, get rid of it. Everything in your introduction helps your thesis make more sense. And then everything you write for the entire rest of the essay helps your reader to agree with you, or at least strongly consider what you have to say. If you write anything that's off topic, or someone reads it and they go, well, that doesn't fit, or I disagree with that, you don't want that in your essay. Okay. So the closed thesis lists out the reasons. It has the claim. And then 1, 2, and 3, it tells you and the reader what the body paragraphs are going to be about. Now, outside of the SOL, outside of, say, random standardized testing, I actually prefer an open thesis. I think it reads more naturally. It keeps some suspense. I can say, despite the benefits of a school's influence, parents and students should always choose their extracurricular involvements. Cool. You don't know how I'm going to prove it, right? I've maintained a little suspense. You don't know what the topics of the body are going to be, but you do know what I'm going to prove. Open thesis works fine. It can sound really good, but you do run the risk of maybe getting off topic, forgetting what your organization was going to be, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a stronger writer, open thesis is a possibility. If you are sort of an average or below average writer, stick with the closed thesis. It's safer, it's easier, and it's more likely to score well, just because you're less likely to get off topic. So I always do a rough draft of the thesis first. Then before I start writing the essay, I make my basic outline. I like to make a list. I don't even do, capital, I don't do Roman numerals and capital and lowercase letters and all this. I do my rough draft of my thesis. And then I put body paragraph 1, here's the topic. And I list 2 pieces of evidence. So if I say say we're doing the extracurricular thing, if the first one's personal responsibility, I would say, my first example would be when I learned that I'd overburdened myself. It's a time management issue. I think it was like seventh grade. I was playing football and I was trying to play fall baseball, and I was taking like an advanced math class or something. It was all too much. Like I was miserable, right? I would use a personal example and talk about how I learned personal responsibility. Okay. I then could use the same example and then talk about how I learned time management. I learned that I can't take on too much. So I have two examples that are personal, or I could pull one from myself and one from a movie or one from a friend. I strongly recommend that you have at least two pieces of evidence, two examples for each body paragraph. You are much, much more likely to pass the test and score high. You can get by with just one piece of concrete evidence, one specific example in each paragraph, but the paragraphs tend to be a little shorter. They're less well developed. You do run the risk of dropping your score a little bit because they're going to look at it and say, we didn't fully elaborate. You don't have enough evidence and you don't have enough commentary. Now, if you have one great piece of evidence and you can write a good long paragraph exploring that idea and how it supports your thesis, that's fine. You can do that. But in most cases, two is better. Anyway, rough draft of my thesis, topic first body paragraph. I just list the evidence. If I want to make a note or two about what I want to say about it so I remember I can look at it later, I jot down those notes. Next body paragraph, I list the evidence. The reason I limit it to the evidence is if I know that I have a good thesis, I have good topics, and I have good evidence that goes with them, the commentary, the explanation, the argument, that all comes naturally. I know what I'm going to say about that. But if I get halfway through the essay, I go to the next topic and I go, oh, I don't have an example for this. Now in the middle of the essay, when I should just be flowing, I should just be writing this thing, keep it moving, I stop and I have to reconsider, well, is this really, am I thinking the right things? I don't know. I second guess myself. I slow down. I get stressed out. It all goes downhill. You want to have your thesis, body paragraph, topics, and evidence chosen ahead of time. It's also a good idea to consider counter arguments. I have a slide on counter arguments later on. At least once in this essay, you need to make a counter argument. I recommend trying for at least one per body paragraph. Some of you have teachers who have said you write two paragraphs for your thesis and then a counter argument paragraph. You can do that. I won't disagree with your teacher. That's certainly a possibility. I recommend to my students that they don't do that because it seems like you're giving up a lot of real estate. If you're only writing 5 paragraphs and you give one whole paragraph to why other people have reasonable ideas and then try to redirect back to your own, you run the risk if you don't really execute the concession is fine. I'll give you this, sure, some people may say blah, blah, blah. If I don't do the refutation, if I don't bring you back to my point well enough, then I basically just wrote a paragraph that argued for the other side. And so I don't recommend trying to write a whole paragraph of counter argument. I recommend trying to work in a 1-sentence counter argument into each of the body paragraphs if or when they fit. Okay. And we'll look at that again coming up. So definitely make a list, make a simple outline. I promise it pays dividends. I know most students, most 11th grade students have no interest in doing this. You're like, whatever, I know what I want to say. And you might. But if you take a minute or two to jot it down first, you're going to write faster. I always tell students for time tests, like for AP exams, or they've gotten rid of it now, but the SAT essay, I always tell students that approximately 10% of your time should go into planning. So let's say you were going to try to write this whole thing in an hour, start to finish, you get your prompt, you're going to try for an hour. You could take your whole school day if you want, but I would tell you 6 minutes should go into breaking down the prompt, copying it down, make sure you know what it means, listing out your options, doing a quick T-chart, write a rough draft of the thesis, and then make a quick list of your topics and evidence. And if that takes you 6 minutes or even 8 minutes, that is time well spent because it means that you're not going to get stuck later on. You're not going to hit that point halfway through the essay where you have to stop and go, oh, I don't know what to say next. I promise you waste more than a couple of minutes in that situation. If you do all the thinking, the planning ahead of time, once you start writing, let it flow, right? And then you'll proofread it later. So it's time to start writing. Now, this document, and if you want, you can pause here and zoom in on the screen. This is a handout that I've used for years and years. A lot of people use an image similar to the one on the left. The breakdown on the right, these are the terms that I use when talking about the parts of a good standard academic essay. You have an introduction paragraph, the hook, background and context info, and then the thesis. All your body paragraphs work the same. Topic sentence, ideally it's an arguable claim. Then, evidence with commentary. And then you should do it twice: evidence, commentary, counter argument, and a closing sentence if necessary. Sometimes you don't need that because the counter argument brings you back to where you restate your topic of the paragraph. You do the same thing in each body paragraph. And then your conclusion is you restate the thesis, review and synthesize the key information, and go for a strong, interesting ending. That's it. That's all we're going to do. But over the next few slides, I'm going to break this down and give you a sample so you know what each one of these means. So let's get started. Now we're looking at an introduction. Introduction paragraph, real simple. Like I said, you start off with something that grabs attention, sets up the topic. You write a couple of sentences where you lay down some background information. If you have one of the prompts that has a quote in it, this is a good time to use the quote. If you have something like, the extracurricular, question, maybe this is where you explain that many students engage in extracurricular activities like sports, music, art, clubs, blah, blah, blah. But that also can be a burden, to their time management, can create stress. Some people think that schools should choose, but that is not necessarily popular. There's my background. Then I hit them with the thesis. Parents and students should choose their extracurricular activities because. Now, if I want to make any minor adjustments to the rough draft of the thesis that I wrote on my scratch paper, now I make the final draft on the screen. Okay. I know a lot of you deal with writer's block. You try to start writing, like, how do I start this? How do I say? The number one way you can make it easier to start your essay is to write your thesis first. Because if I know what I'm going to prove to you, then I know what I need to get you interested in and how to set it up. If I don't have the thesis written yet, and I say, well, how do I start an interesting sentence on this topic? You don't know what you're going to argue yet. I can't introduce you to something I don't know, right? I have to know the topic to introduce you to it. So for those of you who struggle to start well, remember, we want to say something interesting, grab their attention. And I strongly recommend that you do that after you know the point of the paper. I also recommend that in your hook, you do not ask a question. Okay, they're usually cheesy or plain, or you just rewrote the prompts to start it, which is not very creative and usually lowers your score a little bit. Say something general, if it's the extracurricular essay, you could say, students today are busier than they've ever been, and as a result deal with more stress, anxiety, and pressure, period. People are like, ooh, I'm worried about students, or yeah, people are busy. You might even get an old guy who's like, well, I don't think kids are busier than I am today. Doesn't matter. You got them thinking about it. They're interested, you go. Talk about the concept, the big idea. Don't go straight to the prompt. That's weak. Okay. Then you fill them in with the background, use the stuff from the prompt. If necessary, just put it in your own words, hit them with the thesis. So here's a sample on a new prompt. So I'm going to read the prompt to you, and then I'll show you how I put together an introduction paragraph. Here we go. The British naturalist and politician John Lubbock wrote, "Your character will be what you yourself choose to make it." Do we choose our own character traits, or is our character formed by influences beyond our control? Take a position on this issue. Support your response with reasons and examples. That's, it's interesting. Is my character based on my own choice, or do things outside of me influence? The reality, this is like nature versus nurture, right? Am I born to be who I am? It's all fated. It's in my DNA. It's whatever. That's the things that I can't control. My family makes me who I am. My society does, whatever. Or do I get to choose? I can say, no, today I'm going to be a different guy. I'm going to act differently, treat people differently, think differently, whatever. The reality is it's both, right? In real life, it's not nature versus nurture. It's nature via nurture, right? But look at that reminder at the end there. Take a position on this issue. So I have to argue that who I am, my character, all of us, our characters, are more formed by our own choices. We choose our character traits, or that our character traits and our character more formed by those outside forces, those things that we can't control. Okay. It's an interesting question, but it's a tough one to think about. Again, watch the other video for the prompt breakdowns. You've got 40, I forget the number, 43, 45, I don't know, prompts. You want to make sure you understand all of them ahead of time. So here's my introductory paragraph for it. I start with a hook. I fill in the background, a little context. What are we talking about and why? And then the thesis at the end. More than anything else, a person's character will determine his life's outcomes. British politician John Lubbock once said, "Your character will be what you yourself choose to make it." In reality, a variety of factors influence character, and while personal decisions do hold sway, they are not all powerful. Character is formed by influences beyond our control because parents, school, and media have major effects on young people. There we go. And by the way, this isn't like a well planned out, thought out essay kind of deal. I literally went through this working with students live in person, and we picked the prompt. We went through and said, okay, let's pick a prompt. We did the little breakdown. We did the little T chart, and then I wrote the essay with them. And my goal was to write the whole thing in under 25 minutes. I think I actually did it in under 20. My hook is a little bit like a thesis. I don't love that. I think I could clarify the middle a little bit, but this is an introductory paragraph that sets up an essay that's going to pass with a very high score. I don't think it's great. I just think it's good enough. Okay. And you could, by the way, write a little bit worse than this and you'd still pass the test, but I grab your interest, give you the context, hit them with the thesis. Okay. Now we move on to body paragraphs. Each body paragraph works the same. Set up the topic. What is the reason that you're going to address in this paragraph? Good topic sentences are like mini thesis statements. They should be arguable and defensible. It shouldn't be a question. It should be a statement. Parents have a major influence on their children's character traits. Fine, that's my topic sentence. Now I'm going to prove the parents in that paragraph. I'm going to prove that parents do have that influence. And by the end of the paragraph, I will point out that if parents do have that influence, back to my thesis, our characters formed by forces beyond our control. Okay. Once I've introduced my topic, I then go to my concrete evidence. So I introduce an example, maybe something personal. I talk about a friend. I talk about a character from a book or a movie, whatever. Commentary, generally you want 2 or 3 sentences of commentary per piece of evidence. Sometimes you get by with one, but that's usually where we have an underdeveloped body paragraph. We're not going to score real well. So if I do a topic sentence and then I introduce evidence or an example, I should have at least 2 sentences, right, of that commentary. Let's say I then just do a counter argument and my counter argument effectively closes the paragraph. Your body paragraphs should not be shorter than 5 sentences. 5 sentences is the minimum for a body paragraph on this essay. Topic sentence, evidence, commentary, counter argument. Okay. Now, if I really write a fully fleshed out, robust paragraph, I would have a topic sentence, evidence, commentary, maybe more than that. Another piece of evidence, another example, commentary, counter argument, closing sentence. I should be writing somewhere between 5 and 10 sentences per body paragraph. Now, if you have a little more to say and you want to do 3 or 4 sentences of commentary instead of just 2 like I did, you might end up a little bit higher, but 5's the minimum. I don't recommend writing more than about 12 or 13 sentences per paragraph just because you're going to run out of space. Okay, so keep that in mind. I don't want you going through your essay like counting sentences. Is this the right number? But it's called the short paper for a reason. You got to make sure that you keep it in range, right? So, and then the other thing here at the bottom of the slide is a basic format for a counter argument. Is an easy way I teach my students to do it. You say, many people think, give something that people disagree with. You say, I'm saying parents have a big influence. And you say, many people think that young people actually rebel against their parents and therefore parents don't have that much influence. Then I got to bring them back to my point. However, if young people form their character by rebelling against their parents, the parents' influence was still the cause of the rebellion. Parents' influence leads to character, formation. Done. No matter what, I'm going to point out that you might have a reasonable disagreement with something I've said in this paragraph. However, and I bring you back. Okay, now look at that in a little more detail. You have to have at least one in your essay. If you don't have a counter argument anywhere in here, you drop on the rubric and there's a good chance that you lower your score to a place where you might not be passing, even if the rest of the essay is pretty good. Okay. And then all counter arguments have 2 parts: concession, I concede, I give away a point, and then refutation. I refute how important that is, or I refute that that's actually better than the idea I had in the first place. So an easy format, you can do some people think, or some may say, or many people believe. You just indicate other people have a different idea than you, and that's okay. And then fill that in. Make sure that first half of the sentence would be a complete sentence. Some people think parents' influence isn't that strong. I can do a period. But instead, I'm going to do a semicolon, however, comma, and then I write a complete sentence that explains why my idea was better or more important, or, you think this, and that's fine. However, here's what you were missing. You must have a complete sentence on each side of the semicolon. That's the basic way to use a semicolon. You put it where you could have put a period, but you want your audience to read these 2 ideas like they're one. I want to force my reader to think of them together. So I don't say, here's why you're right, period, because then people are like, hey, I was right. I do, here's how you're right, semicolon, here's why I'm more right. And the semicolon attaches them. This does 2 things. One, it makes it rhetorically more effective because I don't give away the point and stop. I partially give away a point and I bring you back to what I want to say. It also shows the reader that you know how to correctly and effectively use a semicolon. And when they see students who can accurately use semicolons and colons, they tend to believe that you are on average a more skilled writer, at least in terms of the mechanics. They tend not to look as carefully for mistakes in other places. I recommend if you can, try to use a good semicolon or colon, at least in the first body paragraph. If you know how to use a semicolon, use one in the introduction. And this is a great trick. This works well in AP essays, the old SAT essay, things like that. If you use a semicolon or a colon in the opening paragraph or early in the second paragraph, the reader sees it. They go, oh, you know what you're doing. And they read a little bit faster. They don't go looking for comma mistakes as much because they have the sense you already kind of know what you're doing. If you use it incorrectly, it has the opposite effect. So make sure you know what you're doing. But counter argument's a perfect time to show them that you know how to use a semicolon. Okay. So here's an example. Some people do not have parents or have parents who are not good people. However, even bad or absent parents influence their children's behaviors. Think about it. If your parents aren't around, you say, well, how can they influence my behavior? Well, growing up, with grandparents or, with an aunt or with a neighbor or something has an impact on you. Your parents' decision not to be around or, whatever happened, they're not around, still has that impact. That's the point I'm trying to make in there. Okay. So now let's look at the whole paragraph. Here is the full body paragraph. Remember, I did this whole thing quick, so it's not perfect, but it works. Parents have a major influence on the character of young people. For example, my father grew up very poor, but has done well in his life because he worked hard. Because I grew up seeing him work hard, I began working hard as well. My father's hard work helped to buy a nice house and to put decent clothes on my back. I appreciated the house and the clothes, and now I work hard to be successful like him. That was my personal example. So topic sentence, personal example, a couple of sentences. I actually have, I think, 3 there where I explain what that all means. Then I go to my other evidence. Another way that parents can influence character is through their treatment of their children. My mother was always extremely kind to people throughout her life. When I was young, I saw how her kindness to people, including strangers, helped her to get through her days with a smile on her face. Now, as an adult, I try to be as kind as possible so that I keep myself and them happy. There it is. That was my commentary. Ready for a counter argument. Some people do not have parents or have parents who are not good people. However, even bad or absent parents influence their children's behaviors. Our characters are often influenced by others. Now, if I wasn't rushing as much, or if I had time to go back and revise this, remember, not a time test. You have the time to go back. I would probably add an extra sentence after that counter argument to clarify, what does that mean? Absent parents still influence the behavior. Well, I already did that part out loud. I would add that, right? But this works. Is this the greatest paragraph ever? No, it's a good paragraph. I have an arguable topic that supports my thesis. I have 2 examples. I have ample commentary with each. I have a counter argument. I have a quick closing. If you can generate a paragraph like that, even if it's a little bit shorter, you're well on your way to passing this test. All right, so we did one. All body paragraphs work the same. You're just going to substitute different topic, different evidence, and then explain that. My conclusion. So first, we restate our thesis, same idea, different words. Don't copy and paste your thesis. Give them, the basic argument you're making. By the way, this is a really good time to use an open thesis. So if you started off with a closed thesis, parents and students should choose extracurriculars because blank, blank, and blank. When you restate it, make the open thesis. Don't list the reasons again, because that's what you do in the middle of the middle of the conclusion paragraph. So I restate the thesis, and then I review key information. In a really good essay, I don't just list what the topics of my body paragraphs were. What I do is I show you how, by putting them together, where if you combine body paragraph 1 with body paragraph 2, I get this stronger sort of new idea. If I combine the ideas of paragraphs 1 and 2 with 3, when they synthesize together, we get something new and more persuasive. That's what we need to be looking for. Okay. So sort of further, well, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And then you end it strong. As a general note, this is a fun little trick to improve your writing. Don't write in conclusion. All the in conclusion says is, I'm ending now. They can see it's the last paragraph of the essay. They know you're concluding. If you need a transition phrase, do something that actually has rhetorical value, something that can be persuasive. So instead of saying in conclusion, how about we say, all evidence indicates that that outside forces form our character. That all evidence indicates means after considering all of the possible information, we all should be drawing the same conclusion. Or further analysis proves that. Restate that thesis in there. Oh, well, we looked at it carefully. Now we all know. This next one's a little smug. I don't actually recommend it. I think it's funny. Thinking people will agree that intelligent people know, and then put in your thesis. it's a little arrogant because a person might reasonably be disagreeing with you. So be careful with it. Depending on the topic or the tone you take in your essay, it can work. I have students who love to do that, just, to mess with me. But I think all evidence indicates that, and further analysis proves that, are better transitions into a conclusion paragraph than in conclusion, because they're a little bit more persuasive. It's less obvious. There's going to be thousands of kids who write in conclusion. Do you really want to be just like them and get an average score like them? Do it a little bit better, substitute one of the other phrases. So here's a sample conclusion. All evidence indicates that most people's characters are shaped by influences beyond their control. Whether the influences come from television or parents or teachers or friends, most people realize that our character traits are not always up to us. Outside influences are important. When any person examines who he or she really is, that person must also consider all the possible influences. We are a combination of who we meet, what we see, and what we do. That's my thoughtful ending. Doesn't have to be anything groundbreaking. I just say who we are is a combination of all these things. And notice how who we meet and what we see are external. What we do is a combination of external and the choices we make. So I still am supporting my thesis by saying who I am, my character traits are formed as a combination of, but look at that, 2 out of the 3 are absolutely outside of my control. And so there we go. There's my conclusion. Okay. That's it. So that's the run through on the format. Again, you can pause the video and zoom in here, or you can go back to the other slides and look at those breakdowns. Now, what do we do when we're done writing? Do we just click submit? No, read it again. Okay. Proofread for clarity first, grammar and punctuation. First thing you're worried about is check the meaning. Did I answer the prompt? Does my thesis make sense? Does the paper make sense? Did my transitions work? Everything connects. Check the evidence and commentary. Are the examples specific? Did I accidentally use that hypothetical situation? If a person did a thing, go back in and substitute in one of your friends' names and pretend like it's about that. And by the way, I don't recommend that you lie on these or, fabricate things too much, but you can. They don't know you. I mean, I worked with a guy one time who told he had a really high level honors class. And he told his students they could write basically anything here. He had a kid write an essay. It was an old prompt. They don't use this anymore. It was about like bravery or courage or something. And the kid wrote about how, in one of his paragraphs, he wrote about how when he was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War, that, the kid wasn't born yet. I don't know if his parents were born yet. It's funny. It was a great essay. The kid scored, I think, almost perfect for the whole test. So you can get away with that. The problem is when we make up something silly, we have the tendency to either not use it well, or we get off topic and we end up writing this little short story about such a thing. Use real examples from your life, your friends and family, from music, books, television, movies, whatever, history, current events. If you have to make something up, keep it simple, keep it plain, make it very believable, and don't get too wrapped up in making up stuff about that. Okay. So double check that evidence, make sure it's specific, make sure that everything is supporting your thesis. It all makes sense and it's proving the point. Then you check grammar. Don't fix a single comma or spelling issue until you make sure that the content is good. There are no number of correct commas that will save a thoughtless essay. If your essay is off topic or has no evidence, no one cares if you can use a semicolon. A semicolon is like the polish that goes on at the end, right? So be very careful there. In the grammar, you want to make sure your subjects and verbs agree. So singular subject, he gets the singular subject is versus they are. Don't let those get switched up, especially if you've struggled with that in the past, or if English is not your first language. Those tend to be grammar problems that affect people a little bit more. Make sure that there are no sentence fragments. You want to have all complete sentences in this thing. If you like to do like the stylistic, like one word sentence somewhere in there for a little punch, you can get away with it once or twice. Don't overdo it. And you have to make 100% sure it's obvious you did it on purpose. If they think you wrote an incomplete sentence by accident, they say, ooh, you have not mastered the language to the degree you need to pass this test. So be very careful about subject-verb agreement and complete sentences. Then check the punctuation rules. I recommend 8 simple punctuation rules. I actually have a couple of videos, 3 videos that go over this. I have a video on 5 comma rules. I have 2 semicolon rules and 1 colon rule. And again, you can check out those other videos on the Tibbens Education and Services YouTube channel. I'll walk you through all that in detail. It's also super, super helpful for the multiple choice portion of the test. But double check, the punctuation after you've done the meaning and the evidence and all that stuff. Then the last thing is, does it sound good? Try to make sure it sounds nice, right? With a little style. For those of you who are interested in seeing the 8 punctuation rules without actually having to go back through and watch those other videos, pause the video now and zoom in and read these. There you go. Again, I do recommend the full videos so you can get the full explanation, see sample sentences and all that. But these are the basic rules that will get you through both the essay and the multiple choice portions of the test. These same 8 punctuation rules also work well for the SAT and the ACT. Unless you become a professional writer or editor, you're unlikely to run into any situations where you will need internal punctuation, commas, semicolons, and colons in sentences that don't fit these basic 8 rules. So that's a good place to go. Final reminders. In the test nav, typing field, make sure that you turn on spell check first. At some point, they're going to update the software. They may have already done it. Maybe I missed it this year, last year. But there's a spell check tool, but it toggles on and off. Turn it on before you start typing. Don't wait until the end. Do not use the notepad tool. Use your scratch paper. The notepad tool is notoriously unreliable. You can type it and copy paste from it, but if something happens, power goes out at your school, or you don't finish and they move you to another room or the library to finish your test, if you exit the test and have to re-enter it, anything on the notepad is gone. But anything on your scratch paper you get to keep using. So don't use the notepad tool. Watch the character count at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you're not rambling. Again, make your plan first. Remember that a passing essay must have a specific arguable thesis that responds to the prompt and picks a side. You must have specific concrete examples. Okay. You have to have thoughtful commentary, at least one, preferably 2 or 3 sentences that go with each example. There must be at least one counter argument somewhere in this essay. So that's your process. You break down your prompt, you T-chart the possible responses, you write a rough draft for your thesis, you make a quick outline of topics and evidence, write the essay, and then go back and proofread it. Is the meaning clear and direct? Is the grammar good? Is the punctuation good? And that's it. This has been Ryan Tibbens of Tibbens Education Services and Tutoring, walking you through a great process for how to score higher on the writing SOL short paper portion of the test. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via Facebook, facebook.com/TibbensEST, or on Twitter, twitter.com/TibbensEST, or email directly at mrtibbens@yahoo.com. I hope this and all the other videos that I've made for you are helpful and help you to achieve your goals both on the test and throughout your education and possibly your career. That's it. Good luck.